Hi, it's Susan from Worldpeacefull, and I felt inspired to do a video on control. It's really funny. Whenever I think of control, I think of Maxwell Smart, which was an American comedy, and I think of chaos. They always connect. And in a way, there is humour in control as well. But I'm going to talk about it because of the political situation here in Australia and around the world. And it's not just politics, it's in business, it's in families, it's in individuals. Control, the need for control. But before I start, I'm just going to go still in order to tap into inner insight and to also listen to the washing machine in the background, which is squealing away there. Okay. I'll start with chaos and control because that came back to me again in great humour. Whenever we think there's chaos, we need to assert control. And the chaos is within us, not outside of us. We are not feeling we're in control. Now I'm going to slow down here because I need to explain some things. This is part of the human condition, is the desire to feel power. Because when we feel power, we're in control and we feel we can get a rhythm happening. We feel comfortable when we've got control. Those who aspire to positions of leadership are usually people who have a desire for control because it makes them feel safe, actually. There's also an ego side to it, which is to feel superior, to feel respected. I'm going into the male feeling here. To be seen to be in control. There's also security around it. So it's no surprise in even looking at military, looking at police, looking at governance, that the word security comes up. Security is connected to control. I need to control something in order to feel secure. We build walls for the same reason. We erect fences. So we feel we're in control of our space. And then we can expand that out to nation states where they have borders, zones around borders, in order to feel a sense of sovereignty or control over their space. We've got airspace as well. It's all divided up. Control most definitely comes from fear. It does not come, I'm actually, when I hesitate like that, I'm actually going in for truth when I'm about to say something. I was going to say it doesn't come from love. There can be a confusion around acting for the best interests of people and calling it the need to control the situation. And I understand that in respect of emergencies, so people don't panic. That's not so much about control, it's about organising in order to keep people safe. It's about leadership. And I feel leadership and control often get confused. Real leadership has no control in it whatsoever. Leadership is actually self-determination. It's acting from what you know is true for you. It's vision. It's not afraid of going up front, ahead of others, taking risks. The greatest leaders were the ones that actually took the risks. And again, it's not about hurting anyone. Real leadership is actually minimising any harm. Real leadership has a very strong sense of taking responsibility for others. Parents can go into that space of needing to take responsibility. But there's much confusion around the word control. and organisation. There are different things. When it's imposing, let's say, control over something, there's fear behind it. And that control can be very aggressive, brutal. It can be subtle, a form of passive aggressive. And it's to get someone to do what you want because it makes you feel better. Rather than another way of seeing it, stepping aside and looking at where you're fearful, because most, certainly men, will not talk about themselves being fearful. They will assert control as a means of somehow providing an image of power. But of course, this is not real power. Real power has no control in it. In fact, real power has an allowance in it, because it's not rendering another powerless. Because the minute you take control of someone or others, you actually create a counter powerlessness in that other, because they don't feel they've got any say. They've got no control over their own lives. Now, the word control, I've got to try and move away from that. What is it? Self-determination would be more accurate. Whenever people lose their sense of self-determination, they become afraid. This is how conflicts go on and on and on, is because the root problem is never dealt with, which is the powerlessness both feel. The one who seeks control is powerless. That's why they're wanting control. They need to set things up in such a way that they get what they want. And they're prepared to use the ends by any means. Whereas in another form of way of seeing it is the means actually justifies the ends. So means matter. In other words, the intent matters behind what you're doing. Is it a just intent, or is it an intent which is completely self-orientated? The whole economic paraphernalia around that is used to justify control in order to ensure security, standards of living, safety, survival. Human beings are very, very complicated and very fragile, and we often mask our insecurities, our fears, our inadequacies by masks. These masks might look like authority, they might look like a parent, they might look like someone who knows better, they might have developed their knowledge so that they come across as an authority. It's another form of power through, it's control through power, or power through control. And it's to get others to do what one wants. It's to change the world in order to make you feel good. It's not another form of being, which is to allow the world to unfold as something far more powerful than what we are. And what I mean by that is, for example, you can't know the next moment. Life as we experience it comes from moment to moment to moment. We might create a plan and say, tomorrow I'm going to do this, and we might even create structures, which we do, organisational ways of doing things, which appear to be under control. But then we might get something that comes from right field that disrupts, and this is why disruption is coming into the risk management, which is another form of control, strategies. They try to manage disruption, and I understand that. It's like there is also an imperative for things to flow smoothly. We don't want to upset the apple cart. It takes a lot of energy to keep putting more energy into making that happen. That's why we formulate structures, hierarchies. We then give people positional titles in order for people to respect that title and not question it. So a lot of control paradigms, if not all, don't appreciate questioning, because that's like a disruption. Don't question what I'm thinking, you're disrespectful. Don't question what I'm thinking, you're the enemy, you're the other. Because I feel diminished somehow, which is the powerlessness quietly asserting itself. These things I'm describing are not really about people per se, as in personalities. I could mention names and say this person's in control, this person's seeking control, this group of people want to take control, These people are undermining using control. But the truth is it's more of an energy that we all experience at some time or another. I mean, I was walking the dog, Now I could assert control if that dog gets away. I might become frightened that something's gonna happen. And then I assert control and get angry at the dog, let's say, for not doing as I said. That would be me experiencing control, which is coming from fear. But rather than blame the dog, because of my own peace awareness, I recognize that I have to look into my fear, which means I'm resisting life on some level. All stress, all powerlessness is resistance of life because we're trying to take control, and it never feels good. These people trying to manage their lives, they're trying to pay bills, they're trying to manage children, they're trying to work, they're trying to manage a relationship. They seek to assert control so things run smoothly in the household. It could be the male, it could be the female that's doing it, because they're not coping. But rather than look at, I'm not coping because I'm believing that I have to do these things because I'm so frightened if I don't do these things that I'm going to lose everything, I'm going to wind up on the street homeless. And people harbour these fears. If I speak up against management, I'll get sacked, because the sort of quiet control going on there is that you just do as you're told. You're paid to do as you're told. You're not paid to have an opinion. And everybody knows that. If you say things on Facebook, people could be looking at it. There could be a negative consequence. So you self-censor, and that's what control does. Very clever control gets everybody to self-censor. The fear of being murdered, the fear of being, hurt or harmed. It's a threatening, control-based thought that the person responds to without it even being there, because their fears are in the future or in the past. When you live in the present moment, there's no fear, because right now everything's fine. If I anchor myself right now here in this moment, there's no issue, no problem. Some of the most enlightened teachers will say there's not a problem. It's the fear about the problem that's the problem. Unquestioned fears are what we call unconsciousness. When you have been brought up in a certain way of thinking, and we can look cross-culturally, we can look at religions, we can look at gender, we can look at disability, we can look at personality that sees the world in a certain way. This could be the family culture. These things are embedded from childhood. You grow up with it thinking it's normal. It becomes what we call normalized. Groups have normalized thinking. Nation states will normalize that this is the way we do things around here. This is the way we are. This is our culture. And we will defend our culture. This is how nation states come into conflict. Many don't take the time to actually seek to stand in the shoes of the other, to actually understand what the fear is that the other might be experiencing. Cross-culturally, the thinking is different. And unless you've grown up in that culture, you're not actually going to understand them. That becomes something that people get fearful of, because they can't control when they don't understand what they're dealing with. Uncertainty is the biggest driver of control. People are so frightened of living in uncertainty. Something I know quite a lot about, because I live in uncertainty all the time. For me, it came into the real uncertainty came to me probably 20 years ago. I've been in an uncertain space for 20 years, probably, I'd say. On and off. We get this false sense of safety and security when we have partners, when we have a home, when we have a job. These are, if you like, pillars that give us a sense of continuity. Human beings need to feel a sense of continuity. That's why with children we try to give them security through repetition, through patterns. We establish patterns so they feel secure with those patterns. They know that at this time we will have breakfast, at this time we'll have lunch or dinner. They know the routine. They're going to have a bath. This is the routine, and then they go to bed at this time. When they don't have those parameters, they get out of control, which is what people often describe it as. They become reactive to the moment, they get overtired and so on. So we set up structures, we set up patterns in order to feel that sense of continuity. It becomes control when fear drives it. It becomes a pattern without control. And this is the preferable way of asserting that control by those who are aware of it, is to just get people into a pattern and then they'll just do it. And that's what we do in civil society. You know, we get up, get dressed, go to work, drive on the roads. We know the road rules. There's a pattern there. We see the lights. It's the same every day. And we forget on that trip to the office what we've actually travelled past because we go into automatic pilot, which is a state of passive. It's a passive state. It's an alpha state, in actual fact. So with control, we're seeing a very strong paradigm asserting itself around the world right now due to uncertainty that is arising, where those asserting these patterns of control and dominance, and I'll use dominance in there because it's dominating, it's overpowering other voices. It's doing that because the uncertainty scares it. I say it because I don't really want to personalize. It's an energy thing with control. It moves through people. People become vulnerable to control when they have a lot of fears that they haven't dealt with. In a lot of the healing work, peace work, conflict resolution work, it's actually about looking at yourself, not the other. It's about taking personal responsibility. It's about not affecting others in order to feel good. It's about dealing with what doesn't feel good inside you. Because what it means is that you're out of harmony or alignment with your own inner truth. Now, inner truth is not knowledge-based. It's not out of books. It's innate in the human condition. It's like innately we want to tell the truth. We feel better when we get it off our chest. That's an innate feeling because you feel uneasy because you know in yourself you haven't been upfront and visible, and that's the human nature, is to be that way. So corruption, crime, dishonesty, self-deception, denial all come from that root of fear, which seeks to cover up things, to be seen in a certain way, to not deliver it like it is, because there's a fear of not having control or something coming at you that you can't handle, rather than inviting life to come to you as it comes to you and know that whatever happens, happens and that you're not in control. And I can tell you from personal experience, having been homeless for a year now and having had this on and off for a couple of years, it's been a very interesting experience for me to go through, because you have moments of fear that you don't have enough. At the moment, I have very little. I laugh. I laugh. That's my strength. I see the humour in it. It's like, oh, well, can I find the abundance in that? Because as I think it, I create it in my life. People don't understand that. What we think about, we bring about. And I often talk in my blogs about the law of attraction. These are universal laws. This is not a human-made thing. This is consciousness. And it's not hard to figure it out. Anyone that's looked at positive thinking, even in the business circles, can see that right, we're going to do this, you know, we can do it, we can make it, I am, I will, I can. This is all part of positive thinking, to create what it is you want. Because we've seen those who have forged ahead, the leaders, they've been optimistic, they've been confident, they've charged ahead and everyone's followed. Because, hey, they look like they know what they're doing. So we all run along behind. That's positive thinking. The law of attraction works energetically. The positive thinking is, I think positive thoughts, therefore I create the best. And people get magnetized to you. They get attracted because they like that positive feeling, because that's human nature. That's truth as well. But when it's not a fabricated positivity, when it's a real joyful positivity, it's coming from the natural state of the person. If it's a contrived positivity, like I've got to stay positive, no matter what, you're in denial of the feelings that are coming up. You're actually feeling scared, or your company's about to hit the wall, so you're trying to talk it up. It's called sales. Sales and marketing tend to be the fabricated or falsified positivity. It's not real. But when it is real, when you do actually feel positive, when you're sending out a good feeling to the world, when you see no enemy, as I see no enemy, I'll speak up though and I'll say what I think. You're actually sending out what I would call electromagnetic wave. Now, consciousness is all about the collective consciousness. Carl Jung talked about that, and how collectively our thoughts feed into the times we move through. At the moment, we've got a huge thought around terrorism, which has been absolutely carried by the media. In your own physical life, have you actually had the experience of a terrorist? Well, no. But hey, the media says it's happening, so it must be true. Is it true? Is it happening in your own life? And obviously this type of thinking would be to say, well, is it true for you? And you go, oh, well, no, it's not. Nothing's happened. But I get scared when I walk down the street. Well, look into the fear of you walking down the street. Did anything happen? This is what I've done all my life, is I've often walked at night to test the fears that have been sitting in my mind programmed in, particularly as a female. And I said, well, okay, I went for the walk at midnight. Nothing happened. And what I often say now is I'm in danger of meeting a friend. I can even remember once where I was living here in Melbourne before. I did go for a walk and there was a guy who was sort of hanging around some trees. This is 11:30 at night. And I just said, g'day. And he didn't answer. He grunted, I think, or he didn't do much. I can't remember. But I know he didn't speak. He just walked off. I'd probably be a hard person to attack, because I'd probably be friendly to the person. And I've been attacked, and I have actually been friendly to the person and talked them through it, talked them out of it, in actual fact. And I did. I genuinely helped this person. We walked down a beach. I walked him home after he had attacked me. And I got him thinking about why he felt that need to do it. How annoying am I? You probably got home and went, can't even do that right, But because I see the human being, and I see the human. And I was annoyed at the time. But I kind of just thought, no, he's a human. Let's talk about it. Because I'm a great believer in dialogue. It's like we harbour all these imaginings about life, people, what's important, what's not. But we will not allow ourselves to be contested, particularly nowadays. And as I said in this section of my discussion, there is a prevailing dominant paradigm around the world right now. Terrorism is the wave on which it's flowing. And it's very much about a negative belief in others in the world rather than the hard work of resolving the conflict. From a peace perspective, you have to start with you. You have to know thyself and be true if you really seriously want to stop the violence. If you really seriously want security, you have to look at your insecurity. You have to look at the programming through education that you've subjected yourself to, and you need to open your mind to understand the human nature. Does this structure work, firstly? In the case of anything you want to test, does it work? If it's not working, you're not understanding something. You have to be humble enough to go, you know what, I could be getting this wrong. When I was teaching peace, what I said to children is, what's the most intelligent thing you can say? The kids go, oh, I don't know. Exactly. I said, that's it. You don't know. That's great. And they go, why? We're supposed to, if we know everyone likes us and thinks we're smart, I said, no, it's because you're opening your mind to possibilities. This is open-mindedness. Now, the mind cannot open until the heart opens. Now, I want to turn to the religious energy around this dominance as well, because that's also there. Ideological dominance. And I want people to keep a very open mind. It's not a specific group I'm thinking of. It's a few groups that have very fundamentalist viewpoints, and they're in governance, they're in Western society too. But they're a fundamentalist. In other words, they are living out very, very strong, unquestioned thinking of which they believe is right. We end up with a dichotomy of right versus wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm okay, you're not. I'm in influence, you're not. I'm superior, you're inferior. I am in control, you're not. So we end up on these very interesting dichotomies, is the way I'd call it. When someone thinks they're right, they will not listen to those who have a different viewpoint. I used the blind spot test when I was teaching kids, and I had a card. You can imagine a card with 2 dots on it. I've talked about this in my other video on conflict. You cover your eye and you look at one of the dots and the other one disappears. It just disappears because there's a blind spot in the eye. I use that as an analogy for when you think you're right, you can't see the other side at all. You're blinded. Now, this is very, very important for you to take on right now. For those of you watching this who are in the groups that I'm talking about, firstly, I send you love. You can't see what you can't see. So you default to what you think is true, is right, it's groupthink, everyone agrees, there's no dissent, it's got to be right. What I'm saying to you is, let's create a space around that thought. It's just a thought. Let's go into the stillness for a second, which is where the no thought is. This is the true nature of us. So I'll breathe in and just release all tension, which is the life energy. We hold tension anyway. Breathe in. Release all control. Breathe in. Are you doing the breathing? Are you controlling the breathing? No, you can't. You're not in control. That's what this means. It's not a weakness. Breathe in. You're just flowing with life because you're a beautiful part of the life. Yeah, I feel the pain. I feel the pain of those who are controlling. I felt like I wanted to cry just then. They're suffering a lot. And that's why they're asserting all this control. They're upholding these values, these virtues, these ideas. And it's very painful to force others. You get used to it too, and we'll call it command and control, where we say this has got to be done. And we have a very strong justification for that. But there's always something niggling at the side, and I know that you know this because at night you feel it. Some people have hot sweats about it. You feel guilt, but you have to make the other party wrong because then you feel a bit better. It's like, let's make them wrong. They are a this, they are a that. I have to be right because if I feel right, I have my power. If I feel wrong, I lose power within myself because I'm not on my own side. And that's why we put a lot of energy into making it right. But if it's leading us to that cliff, and Lao Tzu comes to my mind right now, it is the responsibility of those who know to tell the blind horseman on the blind horse that he's heading towards the abyss. That's why I'm doing my videos. It's out of love, actually. It's coming from there. It's not saying I know better, I'm better, you're less, you're not, we're equal. You just haven't given yourself the time to be still, and I'm trying to create that for you in this video. Because nobody's going to tell you. That's the truth of it. They're not going to tell you. They'll be diplomats, and they'll be using diplomacy. There'll be groups think. We can't talk about outside the box about this other party who's influencing our political spectrum because we've got business interests associated with that. We'll lose money. Is it true? I've talked before, for those who've been watching what I'm doing, about the work of Byron Katie. Very important work if you wish to break out of powerlessness or fear or stress. I'm also working on it as well, so I'm with you in this. What I do know about her work is it's questioning negative thoughts. That's it. And asking, is it true? For example, in Australia, we just had the Prime Minister deposed, which is really, the feeling in Australia is it's outrageous because we've had five in a row within 5 years. This is a sign that there is something really wrong going on here in Australia. I'm going into the right and wrong. Is that true? The fact that it's happened is reality. It is what it is. Other things are coming from that experience that's making people question what's true, what's not. So in a sense, it's a good thing in that regard. It's making visible that all is not good on the hill. I think there's truth in that. And that when I say not good, I'm saying fear-based. There's something fearful happening. So going to those other parties that are influencing Australian politics, first question is, we need to remove the Prime Minister. My question to you would be, is it true? They'd say yes, because this person's not doing what we think they should. Or what other reason? I want to see him fall. Could be revenge. In this case, it's just a yes or a no. Second question is, can you be absolutely sure that you need to remove the Prime Minister? I'll put it into those words. And they would explore in their own sense of self why they think it's important to remove the Prime Minister from office. He's not doing a good job, they might say. He's not doing what we want. We don't like the way it's going. Whatever the justification is. The answer would be a yes or a no. So let's say they say yes, it's definitely necessary. How do you feel, how do you react when you believe the thought you have to remove the Prime Minister? How do you feel, how do you react? There's guilt there. We have to take action. We get people on side with us to form that, what we call glee club and conflict resolution, a glee club, to give us support in order to do that. How do you feel? How do you react when you believe the thought you have to remove the Prime Minister? There's a bit of fear, there's uncertainty around it. There's betrayal in there as well. And you'd have to convince yourself internally that you're doing the right thing. Then you would say, okay, I want you to look at the Prime Minister without the story that you have to remove him. So when you look at what do you see without the story of removing the Prime Minister? You just see a person doing a job. The story is what attaches around that person. These stories are what we create. There are this, there are that. The public relations industry know all about the creation of stories in order to create an influence, in order to say this is right, this is wrong. Who would you be if you just looked at that person without the story? Now that's a way of seeing without any interference within yourself. You're simply looking in the moment of now without a story. It's just a person. Then what Byron Katie does is the turnarounds. Okay, we need to remove the Prime Minister from office. We turn around to, we don't need to remove the Prime Minister from office. Give 3 reasons why that's true. Well, he's doing a good job. He's not really the problem. You know, he's statesmanly, whatever the reason is. I need to remove myself from the office, from the Prime Minister's office, because I'm seeing myself in it. Give 3 reasons why you should remove yourself out of his business, because that's what that's saying. Who am I to dictate his job to him? I need to be focusing on my own business, which is what am I doing in my own life, rather than looking at someone else's life. Because when you're in someone else's life, you're actually not living your own life. You're in their business. Now, for those who are religious or Christian, there are 3 forms of business: your business, their business, and God's business. So that's your language. You leave that to whatever is happening has to be left to that higher power, whatever you think it is. Your job is to go into your own business. Their job is to live their life in their business. But what we see all around the world is interference. This is why it's a mess globally. All these competing interests, undermining, fixing, controlling, corrupting, in order to get what they want. This is A having power over B, is how we would teach it in management. We create competition. We're winning, you're losing. The losers are just discarded. We have no respect for the loser. Yet someone always has to lose in a win-loss scenario. In the sort of mindset that I'm living in, it's a win-win. When I care about how I affect my world around me, I want the other to win. I win when they win. What is winning? It's an interesting question. What is winning? Is it getting what you think you wanted? Sometimes people can win and realise this is not what they wanted. Was that winning? Is it about defeating someone so that you can feel bigger and better? This is a typical paradigm that's been played out for centuries. I defeat you, I'm the winner. From a female perspective, because I grew up obviously as a female, women do compete, but not a lot. They typically don't have that same drive. Women tend to be more collaborative. They tend to be more thinking about each other because they've had to nurture. I want to move away from the word mother and say nurturing, which is really sharing your abundance. It's about ensuring people are happy. This is a very long history of the females in the world who have sought to nurture their children, their community, their friendships, This is a very different world. It's almost a parallel universe to the masculine, which has been about independence. You don't ask for help. You don't sit down and talk about matters. You know, you're not nurturing anyone. The wife does that. These are traditional paradigms. It wires the brain in a certain way to see the world in a certain way. This is why questioning what you're thinking is critical, because we don't even realize we have certain patterns of thinking that we think is normal, but it's not. It's not in harmony. The destruction that we see in the world is coming from us being out of harmony with life itself. It's destructive. Negativity is a destructive energy, but it's also part of the clashing it up. So we have positive and negative. The two exist because when they clash, something innovative comes, expansion comes, realizations come. So we are meant to be living in a world that has both the fear and the love. But at this time where actually the dominant paradigm, and it is a dominance paradigm, is more negative. And in fact, it crowds out anything that's slightly loving or giving or compassionate, because it sees it as weak. Because it has built walls around itself so it cannot feel that. It feels that if it feels those emotions, it will weaken. And that is true, because the ego is the fortification of people that we hold tough. It's not really the right word, weakening, it's more merging. When you feel the love, the emotion, the human connection to the other that you're fighting against, a softening happens. This softening is that emotionally you're connecting with the other. It's not a weakening, it's actually a merging. Now, in that merging, there's a natural desire to share. This is why when we're in families and we're loving each other and we're sharing everything, we don't even think twice about selflessness. Give everything for the ones we love. Imagine expanding that out beyond your family, into your community, into your world, into your universe. Imagine that. So you're misinterpreting the weakening vulnerability. They will see that I'm actually not so tough, not so strong. These are incorrect labels. We've put a false bravado on things, which is a lie that we've told ourselves about what it means to be masculine or male. These are not true. There's a lot of beauty inherent in men that they don't even access because they've been taught to be stoic. They've been taught to suppress it, particularly in West. The West is very suppressed. The masculine's been really shut down. That's why they drink. That's why they go to the pubs. You know, for those in Muslim countries, that's why they drink, because they're shut down. In your world, you'd be singing and dancing, you know, all Middle Eastern societies, all of them, the Jewish as well, singing, dancing, celebrating, very uplifted in their culture, very open-hearted. But when we see control paradigms coming in, that actually will shut all that down, because they want B to do what they want. So this is sort of a bit of a feeling I've had to share with about control. It's very complicated. I've just pulled a card at random. I have a whole bunch of them. And this is the card that came up. Balance. You can read it. You can pause it there. I'm going to read it. Balance is a state of being, not a fine line to tread. It's a state of being. Because what we're really dealing with here is the negatives and the positives and how to balance it. Homeostasis on the planet is when the negative and the positive have been integrated and balanced. They're not rejected. It's not, you don't push it away because you're frightened. Like, let's get rid of all the terrorists. Let's get rid of anything that threatens me. You can't do that, because when you do it, what you resist persists. What you look at disappears. What that means is the minute you push against something, fight it. You actually anchor it. It won't go. That's why it's just folly to keep fighting. You're not going to win, because you don't understand the dynamics, universally speaking. So going back to balance, Be aware of all possibilities for balance is not available to you when you are only working with one side of things. I'm right, you're wrong. Always remember this. You're blinded, but you don't know that you are. That's unconsciousness because you've not questioned what you can't see. This is why the emotional state and the thinking state have to be integrated in order to see more clearly. You've actually got an inner navigation within you through the emotional heart center. This is not fluffy, ideological, spiritual stuff. This is who we are. We have been born with this emotional state of being, not to deny it, but to feel it. You're here to feel everything. The greatest courage in the world is not defense. It's actually allowance. I remember a soldier telling me he realized the pacifists were the ones who were the most courageous because they went into situations of conflict unarmed. You have to have a spiritual trust in life, that life has its own pattern, that your life is unfolding as it should. This is a belief in that unfoldment. And this opens you up to both sides. Us in the conflict resolution area, when you're in a case of mediating two sides, you're sitting back as a neutral third party observing the conflict, where one is believing one thing, the other is believing another. The one who believes they're right says the other's wrong. That's the blind spot. The minute you go, you're wrong, it's your blind spot. You don't know their experience and you don't, and yes, we could say factually 1 + 1 = 2. Let's say they say 1 + 1 = 3, definitely. You could say you are wrong. 1 + 1 can't equal 3. But if I was to look at that without the mathematical formula from another perspective, a 1, let's just say the plus is not counted in, +1, and the equals isn't counted in, =3. There's actually 1, 2, 3. 1 is counted, 1 is counted, and 3 is counted. There's 3. Under that circumstances of 1 + 1 = 3, I could be looking at it from a different trajectory. Can you see that I'm seeing differently? If I use maths as my basis of my philosophy, logic, I go 1 + 1 = 2, definitely. That's true. Just getting the feeling to talk about Edward de Bono. When I met with Edward many years ago, he's one of the top 50 lateral thinkers. Well, he's coined the term lateral thinking, one of the top 50 thinkers in the world. And we had a debate. And the debate was there were 10 doors. Now, if I recall this correctly, and I hope I do because it was a long time ago now, I may have got something wrong over the longevity of time, but my recollection is that he was saying that there was a goat behind the door. What's the probability of getting the goat behind the door? 10 doors, 1 goat. Now, anyone who's a mathematician, logic, will go 1 in 10. I didn't. I actually said 50-50 at the time, but what I would say today is 0-1. It either is or it isn't. It's either going to happen or it's not. In other words, there's no probability in this type of thinking. But a mathematician would say, you're wrong. That's absolutely untrue. There's probability. And I might say, well, no, I believe that your life is on a spiritual level. It's been configured in a certain way that you're going to live this type of life. So it's either meant to be or it's not, on or off. It's not a question of chance. If I'm meant to stand in the front of the door with the goat, I am going to stand in front of the door with the goat. If I'm not meant to, it will never happen, no matter how I try. And I have actually extrapolated that out before when I've thought of people who others were seeking to assassinate. It sounds horrible, doesn't it? I don't usually go into those areas, but you just see certain people who a lot of people are after and they don't get them. And you think, well, how can that be? Because the person was not meant to go. It wasn't. Byron Katie talks about you die on time. Interesting thought. That means there's some sort of predetermination on your end date. So that's really fascinating. I'm going to read on with the balance. So be aware of all the possibilities. Okay. I could be wrong. I'm open to all the possibilities with how you think it. For balance is not available to you when you are only working with one side of things. You can't rebalance the conflict. Hold your composure in the face of difficulties, and when you remember to breathe, as we did together before, balance is there for you. So when I've talked about the still point, all I'm really saying is you're really just going back into homeostasis, which is balance inherent within you, because you're part of life. You're not separate from it like you think you are. So the breathing is just allowing. You're not able to control that next moment. It's just going to happen. I'm not controlling the next word. I have no idea. I'm just flowing with thoughts. No censoring, because I'm not fearful of what I'm saying. I'm not fearful of what I feel is my inner truth. I'm not frightened of it. So I'm not going, oh, I shouldn't say that. If I don't bring in names and specifics, it's because of my sensitivity towards them. It's because of my love towards them. I don't want to demonize anyone. I recognize they don't know what they're doing. And maybe I'm wrong when I say that. Maybe they do. Maybe it's perfectly right for them to do what they're doing, even if it's different to what I think brings harmony. Maybe at the moment, harmony is not meant to happen right now. But in this moment, me speaking with you through this device, in this moment, there is nothing but harmony happening. And it feels really good. Harmony has zero energy use in it. Harmony has no effort, but things happen. Harmony recalibrates to planetary energy systems because they all just flow. They're not fight. You don't see the plants all fighting each other. Yes, animals do, but that's part of territorialism and part of their survival instinct. But there's a flow even with that. There's a dance with that. It's not violent. It's actually nature. We've misinterpreted it and believe that we are violent. We're fearful is what we are. And because we don't have enough awareness around the fears that we feel, we perpetuate the violence. And then we turn it into heroism or we turn it into defense. Violence just destroys things. That's what it does. But other things come from it. Life being what life is, it regenerates and we learn from things when we make those decisions. And ultimately, we have to come back to ourselves at the end of the day and decide if we can look in the mirror at ourselves and really look into our own eyes and say, this is good. I'm at peace with myself. I've made decisions based for the highest good and it feels good. That's where we ultimately want to be. But I understand that people are going to be making all sorts of choices that don't feel good. And they're going to try and find a way to be able to sit with it. And that's why we create the stories, to try and sit with it. But that's part of the journey of learning as well. You make mistakes in life that, well, are they mistakes? Let's just say they're out of alignment with who you are. It doesn't feel good. We call it a mistake. In truth, it's part of the learning process that everyone has to go through in order to know themselves. So it turns up in positive and negative forms, is my point. That's why I love everyone, because I understand. One way or another, we've all experienced what others are experiencing. But the point we're at in history right now is a time of deep, deep shift. One can either continue on with old ways that haven't worked, with control paradigms that simply stifle creativity and the real promise of who we really are being realised. Or we can question our thinking. We can start to see the world in a different way, that it's not out to get us, that it's actually out to support us. And that we all have sovereignty and our own sense of empowerment. And when we really reclaim all of that, there is infinite potential of where we can expand as a civilization, where we can go. To learn to not be in control, but in allowance is a very, very high teaching. Allow things to happen. It doesn't mean you don't remove a child from abuse, you would, but you don't do it with aggression. You would follow the prompts, is what I call it, but you allow life to bring the challenges to you, and you will know what to do. So don't fear the future is my point in all of this. For those, again, just very quickly, now I'll briefly finish. For those engaged in affecting politics, affecting business, what you put out comes back. Things are being revealed at this time, and so things will be made visible one way or another. The people are wanting change, most definitely, and they want it in a positive way. So I'll leave that with great love and great peace for you and everybody. And let's just enjoy this incredible magic of life with real wonder. And I'll just finish it with one more card. I'll just pull for fun. Challenge. Here we go. So I leave you with the challenge. Life's no fun without challenges, huh? Take care. Bye.